Hello folks, welcome to the portfolio review of Pelayo Martín Fernández. So Pelayo reached out saying that they want to know how to be better at making game art and get hired. That it's quite difficult to do at the moment, but we're going to help you along the way in any way that we can do. So right out the gate, your portfolio looks pretty nice. There's 4 fairly solid looking things right there. I usually do prefer to see less scenes with higher quality bar, which looks like what you've got at face value. So we'll look into these in a bit more detail in a moment. But for the time being, what I would suggest, just from the get-go, is that you have a bit more variety in what you're showing. I know you are a hard surface and weapon artist, but it would be nice to see a bit more variety than what you're showing at the moment, because yes, you're really good at this kind of thing by the looks of it. You've got 3 very similar projects though on one revolver, which is also quite similar but not as similar. It does break out the comfort zone a little bit, but you could do with something else in there, maybe something sci-fi, or something else that isn't quite specifically hard surface realism weapon, or maybe some grenades or something like that, just something to spice things up a little bit. But anyway, we'll look into these in a bit more detail now. Okay, so this scene was posted 3 years ago, so it was a 3D model based on a Vortex Spitfire 3x sight. It's class work to learn how to make attachments in Fusion 360. Okay, it's a new program for you, but it surprised you. Good. It looks like it's professional results, and you'll definitely use it from now on for your next hard surface artworks. Okay, cool. It'd be interesting to see if you kept up with that as you went through. Okay, so let's have a quick scan through, and then I'll come back and talk about the model in more detail. Okay, nice high quality renders. One thing that I'm already seeing too much of is this chromatic aberration that you got going on, especially for something as noisy as this. It really does detract from the quality of the work, so I would definitely tone that down a little bit. Also, this is looking very soft. I know, I've not seen the reference for this, but I imagine it's not as soft as that. Okay, we've got wireframes. Nice. I was going to say it's always good to have wireframes in your portfolio to show the technical side of understanding as well. So you've got the wireframe, you've got some texture breakup, nice to see. Okay, it's kind of hard to tell from here because obviously there's only a snippet of each one, which is fine. It's okay to do this kind of thing, but I feel like I'm seeing some wonky shells here. One thing you want to try and do whenever possible is keep your UV shells straight, even if it means some very slight distortion in the actual texture itself, just because that results in much cleaner bakes when you're baking to a normal map. Because if you're on any kind of angle whatsoever on a normal map, you're going to get some stepping in your pixels and it's going to show up on the end result. So you want to try and avoid that where you can. But yeah, looking at this looks very nice indeed. Let's have a look. Okay, yeah, nice simple bake. It looks like it's reasonable. I mean, you've got a lot of detail going on here. This may not be required for how much is going on in that section. Everything else is baked down, whereas parts like this and also this part here. See this ring that's going around? That seems very high for what it is. Because it's just at the bottom of the screw. It's barely visible. To me, that feels like it should be reduced, and it's already baked anyway, so you might as well reduce the amount of polys that are in it at the moment. But stuff like this is working pretty well. It's a little bit faster, but that's fine. If it's a game asset. What's going on here? You got double layers. Okay, that's just how the lens is. Okay. I'm not familiar with the actual source of this. I'm not really much of a gun guy, when it comes to this kind of stuff. So forgive me if I seem a bit ignorant, or, my lack of knowledge for guns is something I'm trying to work on. The cabling here as well, same kind of issue. It seems very high poly for what it is. It's a very small asset. So like I've said before, a good rule of thumb when you're trying to find out if a wireframe is too dense or not is look at it from the distance that the render would see it or the player would see it in game. And if your wireframe starts to look fairly solid, it's too dense. So see here how basically white a lot of this cable looks at the moment. That implies that it is too dense at the moment. But overall, it's fairly solid. There's some areas like this where it seems again to fall into the very bright territory, and I think that is probably just because there's a couple of edges there that are a little close together. It could be the rendering, to be fair. It's hard to tell when it's on top of the actual texture itself. This is fine to show like this. It's good to show your wireframes. Just sometimes for specific areas like that, it's kind of hard to see. You've got a little bit of warping, I think, in your bake here. It could just be your edge damage that you've painted, but I feel like it is warped slightly. That's probably because of what I was talking about before. Having this shell may not be perfectly straight. It may be slightly ajar, slightly tilted, and that might result in this kind of slight distortion going on here. But again, it's kind of hard to tell like this. But yeah, that's looking pretty cool. Overall, I think I would, as I say, for your final renders on this, I'd definitely reduce the chromatic aberration that's happening here. It just detracts from it. And that's the last thing you want to do, is take away from what you are trying to show people. Because the idea is to show off your work in its best light, right? You don't want to do anything that makes people think, "Ooh, I'm not too keen on that." See at the sides here, it's very, very strong here. And what that does is that creates a lot of noise, especially when you've got a lot of detail already. There's a lot of high frequency detail happening here. And when you add chromatic aberration to that, it then basically triples that. And it makes it very hard to read. It makes it almost uncomfortable to look at, and you don't want that at all. You want people to enjoy what you're doing. For detail like this, where you've got this into a normal map, that makes perfect sense. That's logical to do that. What I would probably do is have an actual small bit of geo. If I just open this in a separate page so I can show you. Yeah, I would have a small bit of geo bumped up here. Yeah, so what I would do is, even though it's baked into the normal map here, I would still add a small amount of geo as a ring around it, just to break up that silhouette that's going on here. And then that kind of just will help add to the volume of what you're baking onto it. So if you had that all the way around, obviously for this one you'd stop it here. But that would just help to sell that even more, because at the moment it looks like a flat baked normal. Whereas instead, if you had a little bit of geometry in there, it would help to sell the shape of it a bit better. But again, it depends on how close you get to it, really, realistically. This is quite a close render. So if that's the intention of the end result, just have close renders, then yes, spend the time and polys going a little bit further into it. You could save some polys from the cable that we were talking about before. So if you remove some from there, you can add them into here, and that will overall still cost roughly the same, but it'll be used and utilized in a more sensible location. Okay, so let's take a look at what else we've got. Okay, so let's take a look at this ZRO Delta Range Ready LVOA assault rifle. Okay, lots of letters there. Okay, straight away I'm seeing some roughness patches here, which is pretty cool, but I think it's kind of reading like it's broken up into thirds almost. So that feels a little too even to me. So I would break that up a little bit more. I would make sure that it's not so frequent in the fact that, you know, you can see like sort of 1, 2, 3, 4. It almost feels like there's a patch or a noise map that's repeating over that. So just be careful of that kind of thing. This is a nice scene. It's very Death Stranding. I like it. It feels like you're on the beach. The material read here feels a little off. I'll look further down in a second to see what that surface is meant to be, and then we'll read more into it. Let me quickly check what this is. Sorry, I didn't actually read it properly. Inspired by weapons of Call of Duty, cool. Made this model in the Weapon Master of Vauxhall School. Okay, so again, you've used Fusion 360, cool. You feel yourself getting more efficient doing high poly models, that's good to see. The weapon model is video game ready with some moving parts. Okay. All renders done in Marmoset, including the FPS render. 36k tries. Okay, let's have a look then. Okay, again, slight similar issue to before where I'm seeing chromatic aberration on this and it's not helping the weapon. It's not helping sell it. It makes it kind of uncomfortable to look at. Chromatic aberration again on this weapon. Again, like I said before, I would avoid it on things that have some higher frequency noise, like this kind of weapon where it's got loads of repeating parts and holes and stuff. It just makes it a bit more uncomfortable to look at. Usually chromatic aberration is good for things like scenes, you know, environments when you're trying to sell that you're using a real lens, for example, and you really want it to feel like it's part of an actual real life scene. Whereas for weaponry and stuff, I don't think it really needs to sell in the same kind of way. This instead should feel like it's part of a studio shoot, you know, with photography, and that wouldn't really have that kind of issue as prevalent. Okay, so I think, is this meant to be a brass or a copper? Because at the moment it's reading like a shiny plastic, and I'm curious if you've shown the map so we can see it, have a look at that in a second. But first, let's take a look some more at this. It's looking good so far. I'm liking the tape that you've got on the handle. It's a nice little bit of storytelling element, and it's quite tightly formed around there like you would expect it to be. I would probably loosen a couple of bits of this up though, because over time part of that would come loose a little bit and it wouldn't fit quite exactly. Curious what this is that's so wet on it. Okay, so is this the scope from the last project that we saw? It looks like the same one. I might be wrong. There's a lot of holes and stuff in it, which is good. You know, that's part of what the model requires. And it's kind of hard to fake holes in a game-ready mesh. I mean, game-ready it's quite a relative term, so if this, I assume since this is based on the Call of Duty saga, that you want this to be an FPS asset, which would be seen from this kind of distance in-game. In which case, yeah, this is fairly reasonable. I think there are some parts where it could do with a slight reduction in poly count, but that could just be from this distance. Let me see if we can get a bit closer. Okay, not a whole lot closer, but that's fine. We can work with this, can't we? So when you think about it in-game, right, areas where you're not going to see that much of, you're not going to see much of these kind of little sections here when you're holding the gun from the player's perspective, and so little sections like this can be reduced down a bit further. And I know some of you out there might be thinking, but we live in the nanite age, polycounts don't matter. They really do. please still try and be optimal with what you do. Yes, it can handle a lot more, but everything still has to be computed, and it still costs to do that. It costs resources to do that. Yeah, overall, I like that you've got some silhouette breakup here. This is like what we were talking about before. So yeah, I like that you've got some silhouette breakup here as well. This is like what we were talking about before with the grips, where you want to just add a little bit of information just to break up this perfectly straight line, because this is something that often makes people feel like they're not looking at a real object. It's when you have these precision 3D perfect lines. You just don't get them in real life, even if something is like milled metal. Well, milled metal might be the only exception, but you know what I mean. Like, it's very, very uncommon to see something as perfectly smooth as that. And if I'm not mistaken, these kind of parts would be more of a plastic or rubber. But again, like I said before, I'm not a weapon expert, so please forgive me if I say something wrong about that kind of stuff. We've got a fairly good poly distribution going on here. Some of this could probably actually still be removed. It's not really, like this edge, for example, isn't really selling to the overall shape of the handle. This is quite a complex shape to do. Bravo. This would be very difficult to achieve, I think. I wouldn't want to unwrap it, which I'm curious to see. Did you actually show your UVs for this? No. Okay. That is something I would be concerned about with this model, is that it looks like, for me, if I was like a hiring manager, I would want to know, okay, how have you technically achieved this? It's a very difficult thing to do, so I want to see your homework. You know, I want to see how you tackled it. So you show the wireframe, which is great. That's what we want to see. But I also want to see a texture layout. I want to see your roughness maps. I want to see your UVs, just to see how you've tackled certain things. Because at the moment, I'm not getting all the answers that I would want from this series of images. So yeah, this relates to what you said earlier about wanting to know how to get hired. Stuff like that would put you behind somebody who did show their textures or UVs. Not everybody's the same. You know, some hiring managers, they do things certain ways. But I know myself, I like to see how people show the work. It really helps me understand that they can be a production artist. They understand that you can make something that is meant to be optimal and beautiful, not just beautiful. But this, to be fair, this seems fairly optimal. I just want to know how you did it. But yeah, like I said before, this isn't reading correctly to me, and it might just be because I'm not used to the source material itself. But I'm just not sure. Like, it feels very, very new and kind of pure. So if this is like a copper or a brass, I feel like it should be scuffed up in some way. Like if it's meant to rotate or pull back and forth, it would have some of the friction lines on it. Or if it's meant to be like a painted plastic, I would maybe chip some of it off like you have around the edges of this painted metal here. But again, like I said before, I like the breakup that you've got, but I would just be careful of how much it repeats. And some of this normal data here, this looks pretty cool, but I think it might look a little bit soft in places. So I'd go in with a very, very minor sharpen on some of this, just to make it, like, especially around here. See this, how soft this part looks? Just to give it a bit more of a kind of a tighter edge on them. Right, moving on to the pistol. This is the Colt Python with leather holster. Very fancy. Okay, so let me see quickly what you said here. It's a game-ready version of the classic revolver that you made in your spare time. You also made the 3, 4 and 6-inch barrel versions and 3 different grips, wood, staghorn and black rubber. That's cool. It's good to see some variety and some change-ups. That also shows that you can work in a modular fashion, so this is good for games because you can have things a lot of the times in like weapon customization menus and that kind of stuff, where you'd make them in individual parts and then it becomes selectable so they can be put together. So the gun tries are between 9 and 15k. Okay, so some special shout outs to people who've helped you along the way. Always good to see. Yeah, always shout out people who help you out or do concepts or do feedback or whatever it might be. It's just a nice thing to do, you know. Okay, so pistols overall, I'm liking what I'm seeing. I'm not really picking anything out. Although what I would say, and I don't know the source material specifically, this screw feels very close to the edge. Even if that is the case in the real version, I would still move these up very slightly, just so that you're not right on the cusp of that bevel, because it kind of bleeds into the screw, and then that makes it feel like the screw isn't really there because it's not being affected by it. Like if you imagine in real life, if you had an edged bevel and you had a screw right next to it, if that bevel cut into where the screw is, you would see like a little chamber where the screw sits in, whereas here it just follows the same curvature. It's very minor, but it's just something to think about. Same with this hole up here as well. I think that's very close to the edge, and again that breaks it up a little bit. So this staghorn's an interesting one. So is it literally just the horn of a stag? It's made of horn and then some detail burnt into it. Is that what that is? It's interesting. Oh, nice. Okay, that leather. That is some saturated leather. I would be careful of how saturated that is. That feels quite punchy, you know, and I appreciate you want to you know, you want to turn things up a little bit sometimes for renders, but that feels like it might be a bit much. And again, I've not seen the source material, but I personally would knock that down a little bit. I'd also look at this strap here. This looks like it's lower res than everything else, and it's standing out, so like this part here as well. Now granted, this is a really small, like this is meant to fit a bullet in it. I know this is a really small shape, so it's good that you're being efficient, but I think for the larger strap section, this feels a little bit low. Beautiful renders, really nicely done. I like this kind of studio setup that you got going on at the moment. This feels much nicer, and I'm not seeing the chromatic aberration from last time either, so it's good to see, because that's kind of an easy thing for people to fall into, is getting stuck in that loop of always putting chromatic aberration on the renders. It has its place, but this isn't it. Right, so we've got some nice detail on the handle here, on the grip, I should say. It's probably the correct term, right? It's looking really nice. I think the one for this one feels like it's warping slightly. It might just be me, but it might be the frequency of the noise, but it definitely feels like it's pinching more in the middle. And I feel like this would be a bit more consistent in a real version. This is cool. I'm really curious now about this Staghorn. Like, how is this achieved? Okay, so this is a Staghorn grip, right? Okay, I've never seen this before. It's very interesting. It's kind of like a horn that's been polished in certain areas to make it lighter. Is that the case? Either way, it looks pretty cool. Yeah, this is very sort of... It looks like... I was a bit concerned it might look a little bit kind of... almost a bit fake on there because of how soft and round these parts are. But the actual version also seems like it's got that same kind of effect to it. I would be careful about how soft you've gone though, because even this one is a little bit sharper around the edges and stuff. You know, it doesn't quite smooth out the way yours does. But yeah, very cool indeed. Again, I think a bit of storytelling would be good to have, because at the moment these are all like sort of, they feel kind of brand new, like, you know, almost factory new. There's the occasional little scuffs and things, but nothing really dramatic. So it'd be nice to get some more kind of storytelling elements in here. I do enjoy that you made the different pistol lengths though, the different barrel lengths. That really helps add to this this whole collection, you know. It's like a usable kit. The bullets are nice as well, look at that. So this is all one milled piece, right, in real life, so you've got that kind of thing going on. You've also got this nice kind of edge burn which metal gets when it gets heated up like that, and that's a really nice touch. That adds a lot to it. Like I mentioned before, I'd be careful about how close stuff like this is right to the edge. So I would give a little bit more space there, just to allow for that hole to sort of sit, and you don't need to sort of put it in the middle, just don't have it right on the edge. This is nice bit of wear there. I would try and match that on the metal just a little bit, just to have a bit more. It doesn't need to be super worn, because obviously metal's more resistant than the polish of some wood is, but just something to kind of indicate that it has been held a bit more, you know, some more kind of like grease buildup or something like that. I really like how you've got the metal sitting in the wood as well. Like it feels like it's well seated. I'd be careful about how perfect these are, because these feel like stamps in ZBrush or something like that. And I feel like they'd be more susceptible to damage because they're such small, fine points on them. You know, I think they would scuff easily, they would scratch easily. So maybe get a couple of things like going across that. Like, see these kind of scratches here. If you had something like that caused some actual edge damage on these, that would really help to add to the realism a little bit. But honestly, I'm being really picky here. This is a very nice model. Very nice indeed. Might be feeling a little bit soft around some parts, like the top of this grip, like the top of this trigger here. But like I said, I'm being really picky. But yeah, this kind of render, really nice stuff. Oh, I like this touch with the bullets in the background. This feels very James Bond intro. And look at that. Okay, so you've got the different surface breakup. You've got more of the suede kind of soft back to it. And then you've got the shinier leather section. Cool. This is nice. This is a really nice render. So did you model the gloves and stuff as well? Does it say in here where they came from? For future reference, it's always good to just mention that you either got the gloves from an asset store, or you made them, or somebody made them for you and credit them. It keeps things honest, you know. I understand why you've got them there. It's just good it's good practice to have that kind of information in there. This is nice, showing the variants. That's exactly what you want to see from like a weapon customizer menu or something like that. Nice, okay, and we've got a wireframe breakdown. Let's look at this in a bit more detail. So yeah, this is all fully baked, very nice. It's actually lower than I expected it to be for the most part, which is good. I think some of these feel unnecessary. I appreciate why you've got them, but this whole edge here could probably be removed. Same with the one underneath it. And like I said, I'm nitpicking here. I'm being very picky because it's a really great model that you've got. I'm just trying to think what could give that little extra edge, you know? This part feels quite high. I don't know if it's necessarily required to have that many edges going along it to achieve the same kind of roundness. It might take a little bit of experimenting just to get a sweet spot, But when you've got areas like this where you've used way less for something that is quite curved, I appreciate the barrel is like the most curved part of a gun usually, so it helps to sell it, but I don't know if it needs to be that high. Okay, yeah, just be careful of stuff like that. If something is laid on top of something else, try and give it a bit more depth. I know in real life it might only have 1 millimeter or 2, but for games give it like an extra 10% just because it helps sell it a bit more from a player's POV. Again, like I said before, these edges, I feel like you could probably lose every other one of these and still have the same kind of shape that you're after, and it would be game ready. Because I know you said this is a game ready asset, it pretty much is, but there's some areas you could make some savings. Here, for example. And granted, that is looking at the player quite a lot, so you might want to keep that a bit higher and lower some of the other parts. It's kind of up to you how you tackle it, but it's good to get a bit of testing in. So like I said with the other guns as well, it's good to have a texture breakdown if you can. Just, I'd like to see your roughness and, you know, your base colors, all that kind of stuff. Especially with stuff like this and how saturated it is, I'd want to be careful that it's not breaking any PBR range information. But yeah, very nice asset. And then we'll move on to the last one, which is a new one by the looks of it. So this scope was made 4 months ago. Cool. It's an optic, sorry. Made 4 months ago. Again, you've got this glove in here. Is it mentioned in here this time where this glove came from? Oh, so you taught a student with this one. That's cool. And you experimented with new shaders. Ooh, very nice. Okay, yeah. Well, it's looking good so far. Again, I would mention the glove and the arm, who made it, you know, where'd it come from. This is interesting. Little bit of storytelling. Like I said before, you've got a pencil to replace this part, and you've got the price of the optic itself. That's pretty cool. This scratching, I assume, is from the use. That's where it would be connected to. I kind of want to scan that. I'm not going to, but anybody watching, scan that, see what happens. I'm not liable if it's something bad. Yeah, so the pencil is pretty cool. I think your material might need to be slightly less shiny for the rubber because it just feels a little bit plasticky. Is this a baking error here? Or is this something that's in the actual way that this is manufactured? Because it just feels like there's a bit of a seam there. Keep an eye on that. This kind of subtle roughness variation is nice. I think it'd be good to have a little bit more so it's not so consistently smooth and perfect. Especially if it's something that gets taken off and put on again quite frequently. You'd want a bit more like natural oils and stuff on it. Granted, the user's wearing a glove, but you know what I mean. It's good to show that kind of, it's always touched. These little scratches and scuffs are nice. And for the actual unit, is this, I assume this is printed on and not punched in. So that's fine. It looks good for printed on. Okay, and I think this time you've actually got some geo to represent these, which is cool. It's good to see that breakup we talked about before. Yeah, the light's hitting this really nicely. I like that. This is interesting. What's going on here? Is this blood? It's kind of hard to read what that's supposed to represent and why it would be there. I do enjoy this being reduced so much and then somebody finally wrote it. Okay, this is a nice render to show off how you got both sides of the optic itself and how it's attached. Again, using probably, I think this is the gun from before, right? So it's nice to make use of stuff you've already got to hand. Oh, nice, that's cool. It shows the original part and then you've got the replacement. I'd maybe have a little bit of like scraped paint around the edge or on the actual metal part just to show where the pencil's been jammed in, you know? Because it wouldn't just cut off perfectly. It would kind of mush a little bit because it's soft wood being jammed into the metal hole. So you'd at least have some transfer of the paint. And I like how metallic this sticker feels. Like it feels like a metallic sticker and it's got some thickness to it. That's a really nice touch. Lovely presentation here of how you've got it laid out. And again, the wireframe, it's kind of hard to see when it's on the colored mesh, but we'll have a quick look just to see if we can see anything that immediately jumps out. But honestly, I think you're pretty good. You're pretty golden for this stuff. Just like I said before, be careful of smaller parts and how much data you're spending on those smaller bits that may not get seen or may not get seen often. You can get away with quite a bit these days, but you still want to be as optimal as you can in places like that. But nothing is glaringly jumping out to me. This feels very high in comparison to the rest of it. But that could just be because it's on such a flat section. But this is very well optimized. This part here, you know, you can see you've not got too many edges going on anymore. Whereas in the past, I think you would have done that a lot more expensively. So you're learning, which is good to see. And obviously you're teaching as well, which is also a really good way to learn more, is by teaching people how to do it too. Oh, good. So you got your breakdown of all your maps. Nice. So you got your roughness going on. AO, metallic. Okay. It's using a 4K, which is very high for what you're using. So in game, in a sense of game ready, this is not. You wouldn't not have a 4K texture on a scope. That just simply wouldn't happen. But you know, that's fine. It's fine for renders and booty shots and stuff. But the mesh can be game ready, but texture-wise, that would definitely be knocked down. And you got two Picatinny. Is that this? I assume that's this strip thing here. Like I said before, I'm not a weapons expert. How come it's scaled in? Is that to try and maintain the textile density? I'm guessing it is. So, yeah, it's a difficult one, that. I'd say you'd basically want to reduce that some more. The whole thing should be reduced anyway, but I think if you're trying to maintain text density across the entire asset, you should either try and get it on one sheet and have it be a larger resolution, like a 2K or something like that. But in this case, that would be too much. Or you could separate the parts that you're not that bothered about being reduced and have them at a slightly lower TD. Things like undersides, things like, you know, connecting parts, inside faces, that kind of stuff. That often gives you a bit of wiggle room that you can play with. What you want to avoid is wasted space like this. And if you do have to scale things a little bit to stop wasting space, you do gain back some of that TD. It's not always the end of the world. There is a sort of window of maneuverability. It's not set in stone. Everything has to be exactly the same. It's usually a little bit of lenience, you know, 5 or 10% either direction is not the end of the world. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. So if you need to try and fill that gap by, you know, scaling it a little bit, you could do. But like I said, 4K is very high for what this is. So for example, in most games these days, a meter in the world space would be a 10K texture. So this is not 4 meters long, you know what I mean? So, and granted, I know up close and personal on a first-person shooter, you're going to have a little bit more resolution in the weapon itself, but it still wouldn't be 4K for the scope. It might be 4K for the entire rig, the gun, everything, you know, but even then, it's probably not. So just be careful about how expensive that is. Like I said, for beauty shots, it's fine, but show an in-game res version as well. Now, let's go back to your homepage. So they all look great. I can't really fault the art itself. I've pointed out a few little bits here and there that could do with some clarification or some tweaks. Nothing major really, but what I would suggest in regards to game art and getting hired as a game artist is, like I said, show some more variety in the type of weapons you can create. I would show things in engine. That's a really important part. And I appreciate that it's not always the easiest thing to do, but Unreal, for example, has a first-person template. You could put it in, you can replace the default weapon with your weapon, and you can do a little run around showing the weapon being used. That'll be really good to show that you understand the process of creating the asset, creating the textures, and then bringing them into engine. That is part of the process of game art. It's not just creating the art itself, it's being functional with it. You are a working, functional artist, so what you make, you need to know how to make it work in-game optimally and well. So that's part of that as well. I would do that. I would also remove or drastically reduce the chromatic aberration from the early renders that you've got. It's not helping the models at all. It's just not helping to sell them. It's making it feel noisy and hard to look at. And I would make sure that every model has got wireframes like you have for the most part, and also a texture breakdown like you have for some of the later ones, but not for some of the earlier ones. But overall, great stuff. I'm really liking what I'm seeing. I look forward to seeing some more. Please do let me know if you do any more. And next time it's updated. Hopefully this has been helpful to you in some way. If it is, please let me know. If not, let me know as well. I want to try and help you guys as much as possible, and you guys help me grow in the process. So hopefully that was useful for you. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.